With that, we will turn to our colleagues in the media. And again, always remember to give me the name and the outlet of each journalist.
Hi, all. Just a reminder that we have First Lady McCray and Police Commissioner Shea here in person. And on the phone, we have Fire Commissioner Nigro, Health Commissioner Barbeau, Social Services Commissioner Banks, and Vice President and Chief Quality Officer for NYC Health and Hospitals, Dr. Way. With that, I will start with Ashley from the New York Times.
Good morning, Mr. Mayor and everyone on the phone. I wanted to ask a two-part question. One, there was some suggestion by the shul that the funeral in Brooklyn that was broken up last night had been coordinated with the police somehow. I'm wondering, Mr. Mayor, if you could tell us if you were aware of those plans. And then for Commissioner Shea, can you tell us in detail about any contact or plans that the NYPD may have made with pertaining to this individual's funeral? And also answer, are there others planned, and how do you plan to deal with this in the future if there are other deaths in the Orthodox community?
Ashley, I'll start and I'll turn to the commissioner. I heard about this situation. I believe it was somewhere around the 6:30 to 7 o'clock. I was very concerned when I heard there might be a large gathering. The commissioner will talk about how the NYPD approached it. But I have to say, again, I understand that when people are going through mourning, they're in real pain. But we have to understand what it means to hold a large gathering in New York City today. It means, unfortunately, that people who go to that gathering, some will be sick with this disease. It's just a fact. We know this. Some will spread the disease to others. People, as a result, will die. So I have a long, deep relationship with the Orthodox Jewish community. A lot of personal relationships. A lot of people I know and respect. I have a lot of love for the community. The notion that people would gather in large numbers, and even if they didn't mean to, would spread a disease that will kill other members of the community is just unacceptable to me. So we have to do something different. And we have to break out of whatever we thought was normal in the past, because these are not normal times. So we're not going to be allowing these kind of gatherings in any community. This was by far the largest gathering in any community of New York City of any kind that I had heard of or seen directly or on video since the beginning of this crisis, and it's just not allowable. So we have to change this reality. We will work closely with the community to do it, but we have to change this reality. Commissioner?
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, I think you hit the nail on the head. Before we get into the specifics of yesterday's incident, what troubles me most is, as a department, as a city, we've been through a lot already. And members that have gotten sick, members that have given their life, whether it's in the health field, certainly in the police department. Make no mistake, this large gathering such as this is putting members of my department at risk. And it cannot happen, and it will not happen. And it's going to be met with very stern, as it was last night, immediately being broken up and stern consequences. What we know about yesterday's incident was at approximately 3:30 in the afternoon, we learned of the passing, unfortunately, of a prominent rabbi from the Williamsburg section of Brooklyn. Immediately, within minutes, members of the local precinct were in contact with clergy liaisons and members of the Jewish community in terms of what to expect at that location. Plans were put in place, a detail was put in place. Unfortunately, when you look back at some of the past incidents, there's been a lot of work done throughout New York City with every faith. And people, again, have been overwhelmingly compliant. But there has been a couple incidents that were not so. So contingency plans were put into place. A number of officers were detailed in the unlikely event that large numbers came, and we thought that was a possibility. But absolutely, I think we've been pretty consistent, Mr. Mayor, for what seems like a longer time, but probably months now, that there are to be no gatherings in New York City, such as what we saw last night. So within, as the time unfolded last night, there was probably several thousand people that came in and around that location on Bedford Avenue. Additional officers, I was in conversations with members of the upper echelon of the NYPD. Additional officers were called in, and in pretty short time, that crowd was dispersed. And a number, I think the final tally I saw was 12 summonses were issued for a variety of offenses, certainly social distancing, and then including some for a refusal to disperse. But I want to end where I started with this. What happened last night simply cannot happen. And we need all New Yorkers have come together during this crisis, but they need to do it more than ever. And we need community leaders to stand beside us. We cannot have people unnecessarily being exposed to a disease that is having catastrophic effects on our membership and really New Yorkers as a whole.
Next, we have Henry from Bloomberg.
Mr. Mayor, good morning. My question has to do with how you are going to assess the different levels of risk involved in human activity. For example, why can't people play tennis? Why can't you regulate the amount of people who will be visiting or who could visit city pools when it's 98 degrees in the summer, or regulate the traffic going into city beaches and give people maybe a ticket or a rain check for another date if they can't go to the pool that day, and regulate the time period and the amount of use at that pool. Because we're facing what happened last night is almost like a release of a valve. There's going to be a level of frustration in this city that will be very difficult, I think. Maybe I'm wrong, but it'll be very difficult to manage the expectations and the needs of this population. I mean, am I wrong? What is your response to my question?
Well, Henry, I think you said a couple of different things. I think the issues you raised obviously are being felt all over New York City. But again, I want to say a large gathering, this is a different issue. When you talk about pools or beaches or tennis, you're talking about what individuals do. What we saw last night was absolutely unacceptable. It would be unacceptable in any and all communities. It was a large gathering. Again, tragically, thousands of people. The amount of danger created by that kind of gathering is inestimable. The fact that people will die because of it, which goes against everyone's values. I want to separate that kind of thing from the question you're asking, which I think is a fair and important question about what can we do for everyday people, individual people from all parts of our community as we try to, over time, work our way back to normal. So I'd say is the first rule is there will be no large gatherings of any kind anywhere. And anyone who equates a small number of people around, a blanket in a park with what we saw last night is entirely missing the point. We are talking about thousands of people in close proximity in one site. We will never, ever allow something like that to go unchecked anywhere. Now, if you say, okay, people are understandably yearning to get outside and the weather's going to get warm, we're working on this all the time, and we're going to have announcements on this soon, how we're going to address the warm weather. We've worked with the city council on one piece of it, which is to try and open up more space in certain key areas with enforcement. But when you talk about pools, beaches, tennis courts, each thing's going to be looked at individually. There's the whole different piece of the equation, which we've talked about, which is what can we afford to open, and that's going to be all about what happens with the stimulus in Washington, whether we even have money to open some of these things, and that's a big question mark right now. But then beyond is the question of what will keep people safe, the most important question. What will protect people's health and safety? and places where a lot of people might congregate create a real danger. We have to know we can manage them properly and there can be proper enforcement and that the time is right. So the indicators will tell us when we can start opening up, and we're going to do it very carefully, methodically, and each thing you mentioned will be looked at in turn when the time is right, but only when the time is right.
Next, we have Marcia from CBS.
Good morning, Mr. Mayor. How are you doing today?
Good morning, Marcia. How are you?
I need to ask you about what happened in Williamsburg, because a number of leaders in the Jewish community are quite upset that the members of that community were singled out when there's been violations of social distancing in many places. Number one, they're asking for an apology. And number two, they're inferring that the fact that you're singling out a Jewish community could add to the number of anti-Semitic incidents that happen in the city. So I'm wondering if you will apologize if you feel bad about singling them out. Also related to social distancing, wondering if the NYPD will repurpose some staff like crossing guards who are not being used to help with social distancing. And on an unrelated topic about medical examiners, are you thinking about the possibility of directing the medical examiners to extend the hours on weekdays, maybe to midnight, and possibly staying open on weekends?
Okay. Marcia, respect all those questions. Our team will follow up with you on the medical examiner because, again, I'm asking everyone in the interest of fairness. All your colleagues have been doing 2 questions up front, 1 or 2, and we're going to stick to that rule. So I will speak to your question, and the commissioner can speak to the crossing guard question. I spoke last night out of passion. I could not believe my eyes, Marcia. It was deeply, deeply distressing. Again, this is a community I love. This is a community I have spent a lot of time working with closely. And if you saw anger and frustration, you're right. I spoke out of real distress that people's lives were in danger before my eyes, and I was not going to tolerate it. So I regret if the way I said it in any way gave people a feeling of being treated the wrong way. That was not my intention. It was said with love, but it was tough love. It was anger and frustration. What I saw, no, Marcia, it's not happened other places. Let's be honest. This kind of gathering has happened in only a few places, and it cannot continue. It's endangering the lives of people in the community. So to all those, and I understand politicians, everyone has said, oh, look, you know, this is like people gathering in the park. No, it's not like people gathering in the park. It was thousands of people. Can we just have an honest conversation here? It was not acceptable. We will not tolerate it. I also will not tolerate any anti-Semitism, ever. And for decades, I've made it my business to stand up for the Jewish community, and people know that. Won't tolerate anti-Semitism, won't allow it to grow in the city. We've fought it back many times. My message was to all communities, and that was written in black and white. But it was also to be clear that what I saw, I had not seen anywhere else. And I was trying to be honest about the fact that there's a problem that people have to come to grips with and deal with, or else people in the community will die. And that's not something to get somehow shunted aside. I understand the power of words, obviously. But I'm not going to let that power, that concern about words overcome the value of human life. We're here to protect human beings, and people were put in danger last night. Members of the Jewish community were putting each other in danger. They were putting our police officers in danger. Now, if I see it in any other community, I'll call that out equally. So again, if in my passion and in my emotion I said something that in any way was hurtful, I'm sorry about that. That was not my intention. But I also want to be clear, I have no regrets about calling out this danger and saying we're going to deal with it very, very aggressively. Commissioner, do you want to speak to the crossing guard issue?
Sure, and if I may, I mean, just to echo the mayor's comments on last night, there were thousands of people crammed onto one block. And when you look at everything that we are going through as a city, we live in an imperfect world, and we, you know, my department certainly, I have seen instances of not social distancing, But I could tell you, Marcia, that as you know, there was 2 funerals last weekend for members of the NYPD. We would normally have probably tens of thousands of people at that funeral. We had a handful. People have to be accountable for their own actions, regardless of what neighborhood, ethnicity, where they come from. We cannot have what we had last night. We will not tolerate it. We are going to break it up immediately. And really, you cannot even go to that event. That's what it comes down to. Regarding the crossing guards, we've been hit hard throughout the department. We have really positive news. We still are praying for a number of members that are in the hospitals, but we're on the road back, thank God, in terms of our sick rates. One of the things that we are still watching closely is who is at work, who is essential, across many titles. And when we look at crossing guards, I think it's well known. You tend to have people that are a little bit older. So we are very cautious of how we use those crossing guards, in what capacity, and people in terms of their age, prior medical conditions, and the situations we put them in. Of course, we're looking at any and all employees of the NYPD, how to get the most out of what we use. We've worked with other city agencies in terms of lending some of our expertise to other city agencies, and we would not be against continuing to do that. But we're also going to do it in a smart manner that really watches out for everyone's safety.
Next, we have Katie from the Wall Street Journal.
Hey, good morning, everyone. I wanted to follow up with the questions of many of my colleagues. The one thing I can get some clarity from the commissioner on is, the NYPD's involvement with the organization of last night's funeral. So former city councilman David Greenfield said, I guess, that this was allowed. He tweeted, I guess, some information that, this was organized with the NYPD's approval. I don't know if they knew that, if your department knew there would be so many people who showed up, but questions on that and more details on that. When these summonses were issued, was it after the mayor came and asked for it to be broken up, or did it happen before? And just for the mayor, there have been multiple reports. The governor has cited these reports of funerals, and I even drove by a large funeral once on the BQE a few weeks ago. So why were you so shocked that this was the case? Because it seems to have been a consistent problem.
No, Katie, I'll start and pass to the commissioner. Again, respectfully, I'm not, you're saying I was shocked this was the case. That's not what I'm saying. I've been talking about this issue previously, that we won't tolerate. I even said we wouldn't tolerate. Again, I really want you guys to take the fact that we constantly are briefing you and respect that we're trying to give you a lot of information, and you're all intelligent people. You've heard in great detail telling people they cannot gather from all religious communities in their houses of worship. That's been going on for weeks. Telling people they can't even do services in a living room because that's going to endanger lives. We've been talking about all of these dangers and the fact that we're not going to tolerate them, and we are going to enforce. And we've talked about funerals before as well. That's why I'm so angry that we have given plenty of warnings, worked with community leaders to ensure they gave the warnings, and they have, by the way, overwhelmingly. Let me make sure this is crystal clear. I've said it many times, but I know there are many in this town who love to create confusion and division, so let me try one more time. I want to thank the Jewish community leadership. I want to thank the rabbinical leadership, who have consistently said people should not gather for religious services or anything else because it will endanger their own community. I have seen total unity, and I appreciate that unity. And so it's up to everyone in every community to respect these voices of their city government, of the leaders of their communities. There have been clarity across the board. What is so frustrating to me is after all those messages were so clear that so many people would still choose to gather. I understand that they lost someone very dear and important to them, but this is still a pandemic. People's lives are put in danger when people gather. So what's shocking to me is that after all the warnings, something of this size would happen. And that's where I'm making very clear, unapologetically, that the next gathering will be met by summonses and arrests, period. No more warnings. And that's true in every community. Equal opportunity in New York City. If you gather, I'm not talking again about a few friends hang out in the corner. I'm saying if you have a large gathering, hundreds of people, thousands of people, they're not even going to have a discussion. It's just we're going immediately to summons, and if we have to use arrest, we'll use arrest. Go ahead, Commissioner.
Yeah, Katie, and I think I touched on it before. We've been in constant contact with leaders of different communities throughout New York City, of different faiths. Just last week, I could tell you, members of the Muslim community, members of the Jewish community. I spoke to the Cardinal just this week. This is what we do. And in terms of social distancing, probably not a day goes by that myself and the mayor don't talk about whether it's social distancing in parks, whether it's the sick rate of our employees, whether it's testing that came up earlier today, mental health yesterday, and certainly funerals and religious events comes up. I don't know of anyone in New York City that doesn't know what's going on 2 months into this. I think from the mayor's executive orders, from the governor's executive orders, from watching the news every night, everyone knows what is acceptable and what is not. And conversations between members of the NYPD and leaders who, by the way, members of the Jewish community, extremely helpful in navigating circumstances with this over the last 2 months, because there have been a couple incidents. But planning for what shouldn't happen is in no way having a conversation regarding, you should not equate that with having a conversation regarding condoning a particular event. That event last night never should have happened. It better not happen again. It can't. It is, again, we can talk about this till the cows come home. It doesn't get any crystal clearer than this for me. You are putting my cops' lives at risk, and it's unacceptable.